All right, I'm super excited because my next best friend in the entire world, Rob Richardson, is here. Rob, how is it going?
Going real well. I'm so excited to be here. This is such a fun show.
We just made some really ridiculous videos, so I'm glad we had a minute or two to play some of them. But Rob, you are going to be talking about leveling up your DevOps with GitHub Actions and Kubernetes. These are all things that are, I mean, I know the GitHubs, the Kubernetes, the pods, the things, the Dockers, I don't know. So I'm super excited for it. So take it away.
Awesome. Well, here's the part where I show you all my slides, except for I don't have any. This is it. You can reach me on Twitter at Rob_Rich, or definitely hashtag .NET Conf, and let's do all the things. Let's take a look at the code, which is already online. It is right here at github.com/robrich/levelupdevops GitHub Actions Kubernetes, except for this project is empty. So let's go build some code so that we can deploy it to Kubernetes. .NET new. I love how in .NET new, we can go create a new project. We could definitely use Visual Studio for this, but if we just say .NET, let me actually put this back up at the top, .NET new MVC -- name level up DevOps -- output dot to be in the current folder, then it will go scaffold up a new project. And, you know, .NET 5, so we've got a .NET 5 project spinning up. I love that it will .NET Restore on the way through as well. And so now we've got our project. Let's open it up in VS Code. And yeah, this is a regular .NET project. Here's our home controller. Here's our views. And so our home view, let's say, welcome to .NET Conf. Perfect. So now we want to containerize this app. The first step to getting anything into Kubernetes is to start with a Docker container. So let's build a container. Our first step here, we'll create a new file and we'll call this .gitignore. This is gitignore. Yeah, there we go. This is all the things that we don't want to commit to our repository. So the bin folder, the obj folder, star.user, star.suo, the .vs folder. These are all the things that we definitely don't want to end up in our GitHub repository. And then the first step to building a Docker container is to build a very similar file, a .dockerignore. Now this .dockerignore, surprisingly, has exactly the same format. In fact, if we don't have a .dockerignore, but we do have a .gitignore, Docker will use that instead. But there are a few more things that we don't want to end up in our container. Bin, obj, user, suo, all of those things, but we also don't want our app settings.development.json to end up in a production container. So let's add that, app settings.development.json. We also don't want this launch settings.json. Launch settings.json. This launch settings.json is all of the details about how to debug our app. We don't necessarily need to debug it when we launch it in a production container. So we'll add that to our .dockerignore. Next step, we want to build a Docker file. Now it's important that this is Dockerfile and not dockerfile.txt. So if you did create a dockerfile.txt, come in here and rename it, pull the .txt off, and we're golden. Okay, from. Now we want to stand on the shoulders of giants. So let's head over to Docker Hub, hub.docker.com, and we will search for .NET. Cool, .NET. Here in the .NET repository, we have a bunch of repositories that are linked, places where we can go to get more things. .NET samples is really cool. If you want to look at lots of different Docker files, that's a great place to go. But we want to build, so let's open up the .NET SDK Docker Hub repository. We'll scroll down, and we want 5.0. So there is the container that we will start with. Now, scrolling down a little bit farther, I see that there is an Alpine Linux tag, which is really, really small. So I'll use the Alpine Linux tag. So from .NET SDK 5 -Alpine. Perfect. Next step, we want to do all of the standard build things. So we'll do a .NET restore and then a .NET build. We'll do it in release mode, .NET test, .NET publish. Now we'll also do this in release mode, and we'll probably do this to the dist folder. Nothing magic about the dist folder, but it's a convenient spot. But we want to do all of these in Docker land. So let's run these, and that run command will then just get all of those things done. Well, we do need to have it build our source code. So let's copy in our source code, and we will copy it from the directory where we run Docker build on our local machine to the directory that we're currently in our image. Well, where is that directory? Let's just set this, workdir src. Okay, so the src directory will copy in all of our content. We'll .NET restore, .NET build, .NET test, .NET publish. That's not that unlike a right-click publish inside Visual Studio, but that'll give us all the files that we need to be able to deploy to IIS or Apache, or in this case, Kubernetes. Okay, we do, then let's say CMD. This will run as the container starts up, and we will say level up devops.dll. And this is now in the dist directory. We do need a few more environment variables and other configuration details. We'll need to tell it that we want to run it on port 80. We'd like ASP.NET to start up on port 80. We'd like to run it in production mode. You know, just the normal environment variable doohickeys. I'll copy those in so you don't need to watch me type. Now, this Docker file would be perfect. It works just fine. But there's a few things that we can optimize to make it a little bit better. Right now, we've got our source code in it. Right now, anytime we build it, we have all the build tools. So let's head back out to Docker Hub, and let's go to the .NET ASP.NET repo. Now, ASP.NET doesn't include the build tools. It does include .NET, and it does include all of the things that we need to be able to run our system. So let's do that here. From here, and we will use Alpine as well. Now we have a multi-stage build. Let's call this one our build server, that's using that term, and this one is our production server. They're images, they're not servers, but you know, we'll build this build server, and based on that content in the dist folder, we will then copy it into this second image and start to use that. Now in the second image, we don't have our source code, we don't have build tools. This image will be a lot smaller. But now we do need to copy the content into place. Let's copy the dist folder into our current folder, and we can name this app now. But this would copy it from our local machine. We don't want to copy it from our local machine. We want to copy it from build. Build. Well, where is the build stage? Let's just name this as build. So now as we go through and do all the things, once we get to this dist folder, we will copy the content from that build stage dist folder into the current directory. And now this one will be a lot lighter. Perfect. There's one more piece. Every command in this Docker file is a different layer that will get cached. Right now with .NET Restore and with copy and then .NET Restore, if I change one CSHTML file or one JavaScript file, it will need to restore all my NuGet packages. So I really want to run .NET Restore before I copy. I still need to say what is the manifest that you're copying from. So level up devops.csproj into the current folder. Then I'll run .NET Restore. Then I'll copy everything else and then build, test, publish. So now if I'm just changing a C# file or a csproj file, I don't need to restore my NuGet packages. My build is faster. Score. Now we've got a Docker file that allows us to build up this image that exactly maps to the site that we want to build. All of our source code comes in, and we'll only continue if our tests pass. If our tests don't pass, we don't end up continuing. We don't end up with a new image. Perfect. If you write a failing test, I can't publish your image. So we've got all the content. We have our Docker file, we have our Docker ignore file, we have our git ignore file, and we have our website. Let's commit it. So level up DevOps. Let's stage all the changes. We can come double check and make sure we aren't submitting too much, that we're not submitting the obj or bin folder. Once we're comfortable with that, all of these are new files. So diffing it, we had nothing and now we have the file. Once we're good, let's commit. Cool. Git status, git push origin main. Cool. Back up on GitHub, we can now refresh and we have all of the things. Perfect. We did forget one more thing, and it's one of the things that I always have to go reach for. We need to go grab a Kubernetes YAML file. Now, this Kubernetes YAML file is, of course, the file that we used last time. So, here's our last time thing. We've got a service, we've got a deployment, we've got an ingress, and each of those reference whatever the project was last time. Let's switch this out with level up DevOps and swap that into place. Now here in our deployment, we specify the number of containers we want to launch, in this case, 1. And we do have some variables that we'll want to swap in at build time. Same thing with our service. Our service will reach out to listen on port 80 and forward all the traffic to port 80 in those containers. And then our ingress will map DNS using HTTP application routing in AKS up to our service. Perfect. So in hindsight, we probably should have committed this in one spot, but here is the Kubernetes YAML file. Let's also go grab a README because that'll be helpful to add to our project as well. And that'll just talk about the stuff that we've got. Great. Kubernetes YAML file. Commit that. Git push. And we've got all of our content up on GitHub. Now, the next step is to go build an automated build. And that's where GitHub Actions is really, really powerful. As I come into GitHub Actions, I'm presented with various templates, various examples. And so I can come in here and I can pick from lots of things. If I'm using Dino or Pylint or CMake or D, I can come in here and look for lots of stuff. Now, it thinks I have a Jekyll site. That's interesting. Let's look for Docker. Here we go. Let's set up this workflow. Now, ultimately, it's going to create this Docker one. Let's call it Docker and Kubernetes. Kubernetes. Oh, let's actually look at one thing on our way in. This wasn't quite an empty repository. I did come in here into settings, and I went into secrets, and I added a few new secrets. I clicked on new repository secret. I gave it a name and a value. And so I created a secret for my ACR username, password, and URL, my Azure Container Registry. I also created a secret for my Azure Kubernetes service URL and my kubeconfig that I got out of my user directory. With those secrets in place, I know that those won't ever end up in source control. They aren't part of my source, but I can use those as part of my build. Coming in here into the GitHub docs, I just do $@ curly curly, and then I can name my secret, and that will pull that secret into my build file. Great, let's come back into our build and do exactly that. Now, I probably want to build on the main branch. I probably don't want to automatically publish on pull requests, so I'll remove that. Docker build and push Kubernetes deploy. Okay, so it starts on Ubuntu latest. That's perfect. We start out by doing a checkout, and then we can run some content. Now this is going to run a Docker build. Let's add this and we will run some more stuff. It's going to do a Docker build. Of course, the Docker file is Dockerfile. The tag, well, maybe let's not tag it this way. Let's tag it with $secrets.acr URL, and then level up DevOps, and then the version, which we will say is github.sha. That github.sha, that is the current Git hash that we'll use. So we're going to do a Docker build, and we'll automatically tag it. Next thing, we want to do a Docker push. Docker push, let's push this exact image. And the cool part, because we have our repository URL right in there, then we've just got this in place. So now, one of the things that we need to do, though, is we need to log into our ACR, our Azure Container Registry. That's where the marketplace is really helpful. Log in to Docker Registry. Ooh, here's one, Docker login. Now we can click through to look at the full marketplace listing, but this one looks pretty sweet. Let's just copy it in place and set it right here. Okay, yeah, we need to indent a little bit better, but we've got it. Okay, so Docker login. We can log in with username, password, registry. Let's log into the registry. We'll use secrets.acr URL, and that will get us there. Username, let's go grab our ACR username. Our password, yep, let's log in with our ACR password. And now we are logged into Docker. Log out afterwards? Sure, that works. So now we're logged into Docker. So when we do a Docker push, we know that that is going up to the proper spot. We're also going to want to do a kubectl apply. We'll apply the k8s.yaml file, and that will get our content into Kubernetes. So we probably need to log into Kubernetes as well. Let's go back to the marketplace and go search for a Kubernetes login. Let's say I want to Kubernetes set context. Here's a Kubernetes set context. Awesome. Let's grab this content and set it in place. Now, there's a couple of ways that we could log into Kubernetes. We could log in with a kubeconfig. That's what we'll use. We could also log in with a context, a k8s URL, k8s secret, but kubeconfig works. Okay, so what is our kubeconfig? Well, we just happen to have this kubeconfig in our secrets. So let's go grab this and set that kubeconfig in place. And now we're logged into Kubernetes. So now when we do a kubectl apply, that will go into place. But we do have a few of these variables inside this Kubernetes file that we need to swap into place. We have AKS URL, we have image label, ACR URL. So let's do this command. Now, it is a little bit hairy, so I'll just copy and paste it into place. But this command will do a sed. So in the file k8s.yaml, go find all the places where it says ACR URL and swap it with the secret. Go find all the AKS URLs and swap that with AKS URL. Go find all the image labels and swap them with the GitHub SHA. We're doing this specifically after we push the image so that there's no possible way that this secret could end up in the image. Add to that we're doing it right before we apply it to make sure that all of those pieces are in place. Great. So now our build is doing exactly that. Docker build, Docker push, kubectl apply after we get all of our secrets into place in that Kubernetes YAML file. To be able to Docker push, we log into our Docker registry, in this case, Azure Container Registry. And to do a kubectl apply, we log into our Kubernetes context. Let's start committing this. Create Docker Kubernetes. That sounds like a good one. create a build process. We're going to commit it to the main branch. And then straight away, it's now part of our repository. It's just this file here in our repository. So if we do something like git pull, git branch -u origin main, git pull. Now it's just one of the files in our repository, and we could edit this with VS Code. We could edit it with any editor that we like. It's just one of the files in our repository. But it being one of the files in our repository, it also kicks off a build. We have the build light right here. That's cool. We could also go into actions and reach for it, but let's go straight into the details of this build. Now it's doing all of the processes. It's going to log into Docker. It's going to set the context. And now it's starting to do the Docker build. So after pulling the images, now it's copying in our CS proj. It's going to do a .NET build. It looks like that build succeeded. Very nice. .NET test. All of our no tests worked. And ultimately, .NET publish -c release. Oh, I have a typo right there. Let's go back into our Docker file, and this should be -o dist. Okay, good call. Fix typo. We'll add that to the registry. We will commit it. Git push origin main, and up pops another build. This will be awesome. Unexpected, but kind of perfect. Let's go in the other way to GitHub Actions to get a feel for how we can do there. From Actions, here's all of our workflows. Now, in this case, we only have one workflow, so let's dig into that. And we could choose to edit our workflow if we wanted to, or we can dig straight into the build details. Here's the build details, and let's take a look at it. And now it's going to do all the things. Once it pulls all of the Docker-based images, then it will kick off our build. So workdir src, that's the first line of our Docker file. Perfect. Now it's going to copy in all of our content. Then it will do a .NET restore. In this case, there aren't any new NuGet packages that we don't already have. .NET build. Our build succeeded. Very nice. .NET publish. Is our publish going to succeed? It did. Very nice. Now we're building up our production container. That worked out great. Now let's start to push it up to our Azure Container Registry. Some of our layers already existed, but let's push up our new thing. That worked out great. And now our job is complete. Perfect. We got a green check. So if we go into kubectl get all, we can take a look at all of those resources that recently got pushed up to Kubernetes. This has been launched for 16 seconds. Our pod is running, our service. Now, it may take a little bit for DNS to propagate to get to our Kubernetes ingress controller. So we can actually come out here to Kubernetes documentation where we look at port forwarding. We can actually port forward straight into our service to take a look at doing that a little bit faster. So let's do that. kubectl port forward service / level up DevOps 8080 to port 80 in Azure. And now that we have this port forward, we can come over here to localhost 8080, and we will get straight into our website. Here is our welcome to .NET Conf that we built from scratch and built up that build pipeline and set that in place. Now, that's interesting. What if we want a build pipeline for, say, pull requests? Okay, let's come back in here to our workflows folder, and we'll create a new file, dockerpr.yaml. And in our pull request build, we probably want to do pretty much what we've done here. Okay, so in this case, we'll say on branches not main. So, all of the other branches, and then also on pull request for all branches. If you're doing a pull request, I'll kick off this build. Now in this build, We probably don't want to kubectl apply. I don't want to update production when you kick off a build. So to that end, I don't need to change all my secrets in the YAML file. I definitely don't need to push it. Do I want to tag it with my ACR URL? No, but I'll tag it with -PR just so that I know that I can tag this. And I definitely do want to build it. But because I don't need to push to Kubernetes, I don't need to log in. I don't need to log into Docker. And now I've got this PR build set up. Perfect. While we're here, when we're about to do this commit, let's actually come in here to our build, and we will look at this build process. Let's go create a status badge on our README. Copy status badge markdown. I'm going to set that in place right here on my build, and let's put it right there. And let's commit both of these things. PR build and build status. Oh, yes, I do want to stage all the things. Now let's commit. Git push origin main. And now the magic. It is so much fun to watch these builds go. It is really cool. Let's go back into our build. Yes, we kicked off a build, and now we'll get to do all the things. Once we've got an agent, we do exactly that process. Let's go check out our, let's pull the base images. Let's copy our code into place. Let's go kick off a Docker build. And inside the Docker build, we'll do a .NET restore, .NET build, .NET test, .NET publish. And then once we've got that image set in place, we'll kubectl apply it up into Kubernetes, and we've got our site ready to go. What's really, really cool is now if you come to github.com/robrich/levelup-devops-github-actions-kubernetes, we have all of the code, including all of the builds. They're here right now online, and they're ready to go. If you're watching this online, you can definitely grab me on Twitter at Rob_Rich, or now that we're live, what questions do we have?
Beautiful, Rob. Now, I got to say, there's some mastery of your YAML. I'm very impressed from scratch, knowing where to go. I'm still a newbie when it comes to YAML, but I am excited to see this and definitely will take a look at this. I got to say, a lot of people, I'm hearing flawless demos in here, loving it from scratch. Shred Har says, this demo is exactly what I needed, everything from scratch. Also, Jacob over here just wanted to say, presentation is superb, enjoyed jokes, structure, and content. Yes, a lot of people in Twitch as well coming in with flawless demos. So flawless that we didn't even have any questions.
Awesome. So glad it worked.
Well, awesome, Rob. Thank you so much. I cannot wait to go figure out more GitHub actions and finally figure out how Kubernetes works. One day.
Yeah. And if you'd like to, hit me up on Twitter and let's get on Twitch and pair on this. It could be really fun to help you get leveled up in Kubernetes.
That would be awesome. All right, Rob, we'll have a good night and I will talk to you later.
Sounds great. Thanks, everybody.